Welcome to Steve Couper's podcast for aspiring real estate investors. In each episode, I look to try and bring in either accredited investors that are going to help us understand what they're looking for, or subject matter experts that are going to help talk about what to look out for and how to be better at our business. Today's guest is a real estate investor, operator, and strategic advisor who helps established professionals make cleaner choices when the stakes are higher. She's got more than 20 years of experience building and managing large residential portfolios. She's co-founded and operated property management companies, worked directly inside the complexity that most investors eventually face. That growth creates pressure, decisions that don't obviously have answers, and the gap between what makes sense financially and what works in real life is something that she's going to help talk about now. So, after more than a decade of coaching entrepreneurs and investors, her work has evolved into something a bit more targeted, a strategic advisory role for people navigating high stakes decisions around real estate, around business, around operations and transition. So, in other words, not more information, but clearer thinking. My guest today is Elizabeth Kelly. Elizabeth's edge is that she's both an operator and an advisor, someone who's lived through the hard calls, not just studied them. So welcome, Elizabeth. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Now, before we go too far, did I get anything wrong in that intro?
No, that was great. And it's funny, I'm listening to you speak and I'm thinking, how do you take almost 25 years and roll it up into a few sentences? You did a great job.
Oh, thank you very much. Elizabeth, why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to?
Sure. So I started investing with my, at the time, boyfriend, now husband. And we built a small portfolio of properties, including student rentals. And we did some duplex conversions, a whole bunch of different beginner or entry level strategies. And then we figured out we were doing the right thing the wrong way. So we went and we decided to educate ourselves. We chose Rich Dad, which was a large education company here in Canada at the time. And we spent a couple of years diving into real estate, networking, building connections. And then we hit the gas and we built a large portfolio in the space of just a few years. And from there, we made a lot of mistakes. We learned a lot of things the hard way. And when Rich Dad asked us to come back and start sharing some of what we'd learned, some of our hard won knowledge, then we happily did so. And I eventually became a trainer, and I specialized in helping investors learn the business of investing, because I think a lot of people, when they're starting out, they figure, well, I'm going to buy a house or I'm going to buy a couple of houses and then I'm just going to sit on them like chickens sit on eggs, and then eventually they'll hatch into millions of dollars for my retirement and that'll be everything I need. And the reality is, there's a lot we need to know, because as soon as we start purchasing investment properties, we're not just investors or owners, we're now entrepreneurs and business owners. So we need to know the rules that govern our behavior. We need to understand how to make decisions. There's a lot that goes into getting the knowledge that you need to be able to successfully run an investment portfolio.
It certainly is. I mean, it really, this is something, let's expand on this a little bit more. So with over 20 years in real estate, that shift towards um, more towards decision making. What changed for you personally that made you realize the work wasn't just in the deals anymore, but that you wanted to expand it?
It was the property management piece, because originally when we started, we had this vision of creating passive income and we're just going to hire property managers. And we had some of our portfolio in a town in Northern Ontario, and we went through different property managers and everybody had their own way of doing things, but we couldn't find the alignment that we were looking for with how we wanted our buildings and our tenants to be treated. So we ended up opening our own property management company. And initially it was just to look after our properties. And as soon as I started running that business, I went, "Oh, this is different. This is not what I thought it was." So whether you manage your own properties or whether you hire a property manager, you need to know how the business works. You need to know the ins and outs. You need strategies and operations and SOPs and all that other stuff that they talk about, because If you're just out there as, I call them backyard landlords, but someone who owns one or two properties, who just kind of in their backyard, they might have a unit that they're renting out. You still need to have a deep knowledge of the Residential Tenancy Act. It's the number one rule that's governing how you run your business, no matter where you are.
No matter where, but especially more so in provinces like Ontario or British Columbia, where the rules are very strict. Yeah,
Yeah, in Calgary and sorry, in Alberta, you have a lot more freedom than you definitely do in provinces like Ontario and BC. Absolutely.
yeah, for sure. Um, you and I have talked, and you mentioned working with people going through emotional loss or divorce, major transitions. So this is more in line with your coaching. How does decision making change when people are going through emotional stakes like that?
That's such a great question, Steve. It shows a lot of insight too. A lot of us, when we're faced with a tough decision, the decision I see a lot right now is, do I keep this property or do I sell this property? And the number one sign that people are struggling is when the decision takes a long time to make. You keep circling back to it. Maybe you get stuck in a rumination loop and you're pondering it, and it pops up in the middle of the night, and it pops up when you're supposed to be focusing on or doing other things, and you just can't seem to get that clarity. You know you have options, you've listed the options, you might even have sat down and made a pros and cons list for each option, but the answer itself is not immediately clear. And it might happen in real estate, it might happen in finances, it might happen in business, it might even happen in your personal life. But the same underlying process is the same no matter what that decision is you're making. You know you have options, you just can't figure out which one makes the most sense, and you keep worrying. A lot of times there's worry associated with it, and it's, am I going to make the wrong decision? Is this going to be create an outcome that I can't live with? What if there's something better out there and I just haven't identified it yet? And you just go around and around and around in the loop, and you don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah. Like analysis paralysis as you're looking at deals too, how to make those decisions. What are the criteria for moving forward? And we've talked a lot about that, the amount of noise that's out there that can actually stick in your head, and how to actually find clarity. What are the skills that you help impart on your clients in this new business of yours? Would that help people actually focus? How do you take people from that confused state into a more aligned kind of entrepreneurs? Tell me how you do this. Well, don't give away all your secrets, but please help give me an idea.
Well, I have a very specific process where I sit down with people and we list all the options and then we talk about them. But before you do that, you have to understand what their goal is. So if someone's vision is to create a portfolio of real estate that's going to help them retire early, then when I start working with them, we have to look at each property and make sure it aligns with the goal. Because there are a lot of people, when we're starting out, we don't know any better. We don't know what we didn't know. So we might have purchased a property that doesn't actually create cash flow. It's negatively cash flowing. There's no opportunity or hope of turning it into a positively cash flowing thing. And at that point, the reality is, when you look at it, all you're doing is hoping for appreciation. And if you've come through the market in the last few years in a lot of places, appreciation is not a given. So then you come to the hard decision, do I sell this property? And a lot of times, what happens, the longer we get stuck in this rumination loop and the longer we go around and around, the more it erodes our self-trust. So then we start going to other people and we go, well, what would you do? What do you think? And we go to other people who we think are smart or who we think would help us make the right decision. And they might not know all the ins and outs. They might not be an experienced real estate investor. They might be, your financial advisor who, they have their own thing going on, and maybe they want you to liquidate some of your real estate and buy some investments with them. You always have to look at the perspective that each person who's providing advice brings into a conversation. So the more you're in this rumination loop, the more input you have, the more it creates this doubt in your abilities, this lack of confidence. And then, even if you're able to navigate out of that, you make a decision, you move forward, then a lot of times the next step is actually the harder piece because you've lost that self trust. And now you go, what happens if I make that mistake again? I'm X number of years older. I'm that much closer to retirement. I don't have the runway that I used to have where I could make a mistake and I could lose $100,000 and be confident that I could make it back again. So there's, we fall into sometimes it's the comfort trap where, we're used to making decisions and we just go, go, go and we make decisions. I see my husband do this all the time. He's an engineer, super driven, super, driver type personality, and he'll just make a decision. And I go back to him, I go, what were you thinking? How come we didn't talk about this? And he's like, oh, I just needed to make a decision, so I made it. And I'm like, um, we could have talked about that because you didn't take into account X, Y, and Z, which was information that I had. I would have contributed. We could have talked it through. Whole bunch of different reasons why we make the decisions that we do or why we don't.
Your husband and I would get along well.
I see the similarities, to be honest. I do. He's an engineer, and
Yeah,
there's just, I don't know. My dad used to tell me my dad was an engineer. There's a certain, personality that goes with engineers. And I'm like, you're joking. You can't generalize like that. 25 years later, yep, he was 100% wise in
it's
that
certainly
in
possible.
that comment.
But you touched on something in that last that last point that really hit me. I mean, there's been about what 20 to 25% contraction in markets, especially in Ontario. A lot of folks are finding themselves over leveraged, and investors are struggling. And so what you're offering today is really timely. Um, I guess a lot of bad decisions are coming from people trying to apply what would have been yesterday's strategies in today's market. Tell me what your thoughts are there.
That's such great insight, Steve. And you can't apply and expect to get the same returns and experience the same level of risk in the market that we saw in 2020, 2021, even the beginning of 2022, and then turn around and try and apply it in 2026. And the reality is, a lot of the information that's being spread out there is still talking about wholesaling and flipping as if they have the same risk profile and the same rate of success. The reality is you have to change your strategy when the market changes. And you have to understand, you have to be able to fully understand and appreciate the risk before you take it on. It's very challenging out there for real estate investors because a lot of the returns that we've seen over the last decade have been based on appreciation. And when there is no appreciation, then you have to really understand the fundamentals of a deal.
Not only no appreciation, but negative appreciation, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
How far?
exactly.
And that's something that I used to apply with what I call a stress testing every deal. I'll see how far it can go before it's going to break and see if I'm willing to take that risk or not. And I think that's something that is missing in a lot of the educational platforms that really does need to exist.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you and I were talking last week, and you're talking about a deal you saw that had $200 a month in cash flow, and it seemed like such a huge win because so many of the deals out there right now are, break even at best and probably negatively cash flowing. And I really got thinking about that after our meeting, and I thought, you know what? $200 a month isn't a win
Not a
because
win,
you have one tenant who doesn't pay rent for 1 month,
and you're
and
negative.
that's it. Your cash flow is gone for half the year. So you have to have the financial ability to be able to withstand. And I think that's part of, I'm really reflecting back in my advanced years. I'm really reflecting back on this hustle culture, right? Where it's been so much about, get bigger, get better, get faster. And I realized what we're actually saying is get more complicated and take more risk and work more. And I think there has to be a better balance between strategic acquisition. Sometimes, instead of buying 10 properties, maybe we buy seven, but we make sure we have deeper financial reserves. Maybe we make sure that our portfolio loan to value is 70% and not 80 or 90% loan to value, which gives us the ability to be able to withstand some of this risk. I look at what's happened over the last couple of years, and it's really an opportunity for us as investors to look at our business practices and make sure that if this happens again in the future, because we all know real estate's cyclical. I lived through 2008. We were buying in 2009, 2010. We were picking up super deals from motivated landlords, but we hadn't seen the pain from the front end. This is, seeing the pain firsthand of investors losing money is devastating financially.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for us as investors to take our foot off the gas and start making better decisions about how we build and structure our lives and our portfolios.
Couldn't agree more. You've built I think something called a deliberate decision framework for when somebody is overwhelmed on stock. What what uh, what kind of pushback do you get from people as you're coaching them? Is there anything that you're finding is really getting an emotional reaction, or there's a pain point in there for most people? Are they all in the same boat, or is it different for everybody?
Um, so the two biggest, I love that you asked that question. No one's asked that. The two biggest things that I see as pushback, one is the fact that most of our decisions are patterns. So where we believe that we make a decision in real estate and we're deciding about, let's say, for example, we're deciding about whether to keep a property. The reality is we're probably making decisions the same way in multiple areas of our lives, and people just don't see the patterns because we need to step back and have the perspective to see it. The second one is the emotional connection that people have to properties. And you would think it's so silly. Like, why would people be emotionally connected to a pile of bricks that is somewhere else? And, we probably never lived there. But the reality is, our properties, they become part of an identity that we create for ourselves. We become investors. And I tease my husband, I used to anyways, and I would tell him, I'm like, you're not an investor, you're a property hoarder. Because instead of it, treating our portfolio like a bonsai tree where we go, oh, this one didn't turn out the way we thought it would. Let's get rid of this one and free up the capital to acquire one that better suits, the overall picture that we want to create. He's like, no, 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 we'll figure it out. He's like, I want to keep all of our properties. I don't want to sell anything. And I really think we have to be a little more discerning, like someone, I'm assuming you're kind of familiar with bonsai trees. You're the same generation as me. So, slow growing, prune them very carefully.
I've got two upstairs.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So you understand the analogy. But the reality is, we have to keep the perspective that we step back and look at what things are and not what we wish they were or not what we hoped they would be. And part of that is making sure that, every 4 to 6 months you're conducting an analysis of your portfolio and really looking, are these properties making sense? Are my interest rates working for me? Are these properties producing the returns that I want to see? Given that appreciation is not guaranteed. And if the answer is no, then you start looking at other ways to utilize the properties. And failing that, then you look at selling because it does not make sense to drag properties along with you over the years if they are not performing. Because every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So if you say yes to a property in your portfolio that's not performing the way that it should, you're saying no to the potential to acquire a property that actually works harder and does better for you.
It's true, true. Um, One of the ideas I think I read in one of your posts had something to do with a capability paradox, where more options actually make decisions harder. So how do high performers get or avoid getting trapped in that capability paradox? What are your thoughts?
Love it. So, capability paradox is basically the more that you know, the more the opportunities come to you. So, the more flooded you become and the more decisions you have to make, which of course creates decision fatigue. So, one of the ways that I sort of focus on managing capability paradox is I make sure that I have what I call a buy box. So basically, I have very specific criteria that a property or a business opportunity or an investment must meet before I even look at it, because I get people all the time who message me and say, hey, do you know anyone buying? I have this deal. And I appreciate the effort and I appreciate the dedication that people have to, hustling and looking for a buyer for their clients or whatever it is they're doing. But I have to be really clear on what my goal is and what success looks like. And when I keep that box really small, it's really easy for me to make a quick, read through a paragraph quickly and go, no, this isn't the right fit for me. And it reduces the amount of decisions I have to make. So I am still looking at a large number, but the actual effort I put into decision making is more a yes, no, and less of a I have to run numbers and do a deep investigation. And it just tends to keep things smaller and simpler. I also find that AI has been a tremendous benefit in terms of being able to feed information in. You can't trust it 100%. We know it hallucinates and does all its other stuff. But the reality is, if I have my very specific prompt that I create, then I can just feed the information in and it helps me make sure I'm fact checking and making sure that my opinions and my gut are feeding me the right information and that there's some alignment there.
Oh, there's a whole slew of questions that come to mind as you open that door.
AI is just, I don't know. I mean, you see some of the stuff out there, and it sounds really scary about, 5 years from now, and AI is going to take over and it'll run the world, and we'll all just be, doing its beck at its beck. And I think, I don't know that we're headed in that direction. That seems a little dark for me, but I think if you are not embracing AI at this point, like your guest Judith has done a fantastic job embracing AI. And if you're not embracing it, then I think it's going to be one of those things where you kind of get left behind, right? You'll
I,
become a blockbuster.
I can't agree more. It's actually something that we all need to start exploring and test driving, while at the same time recognizing that you need to test the conclusions out. You need to proofread everything. You need to make sure that the analysis aligns with what you're looking for, and it's not taking you down a bit of a garden path. So that
Yeah.
hallucinating is one thing, but also it tends to, I think, start assuming more about you than I like. That's one of the things I'm struggling with right now. No, I wouldn't write that. No, that's not something that I feel. I'm second guessing a lot of the conclusions, but I'm still at the same point. I think exploring this new world with AI a lot more. Say new, I guess it's been around longer than I have, but it's actually become something that's in everybody's inbox now.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that the key with AI is that people need to get better at asking questions. And I think a lot of times in conversations now, people are so emotional that they're thinking about the next thing that they can talk about. And AI really forces us to get better at the questions that we're asking.
You're so right. And that's actually true of life, not just within AI, but all things.
Yeah.
It's how we grow and how we learn and how you can discern one person from another is the quality of the questions they ask. It's such a great insight. Um, so last time you and I talked, you mentioned that you've shifted from pure real estate to real estate with business. And let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. What would you like to know?
Well,
Um,
yeah, what does that say about your buy box and the opportunities you're looking for the next decade? How are you structuring that?
Well, I took some time during COVID and I really stepped back and I looked at what did well and what I enjoyed. And that's the first time I've spent a lot of time looking at what I enjoyed about real estate. And I'd always loved rent to owns. It's my absolute favorite strategy because you feel good when you're helping families. But what I realized looking at all the apartment buildings and all the residential rentals, and we have some commercial stuff too, is that I was too much at the mercy. I was taking too much risk with the Residential Tenancy Act. And in Ontario, it's been a really tough go. We had a really, really tough time as landlords during COVID. And I discovered that the business that I run, the commercial business that I run, has way more freedom. There's way more opportunity. There's a lot of different levers that I can pull to increase my income. If it's struggling on one side, if I'm not getting as many short stay accommodation guests, then I can work on another area of the building and bring in more commercial income. It gives me the opportunity. I've got a larger piece of property, so I can look at other uses, other future uses for it. So I guess I should back up a little bit. I have a large commercial building that used to be a seniors residence in Northern Ontario, and we have 50 rooms that we rent out for people who are coming to Kirkland Lake to work, who need somewhere to stay for, a few weeks to a few months. And then we also have some commercial businesses in there, and it's on a large piece of property with some land that is not currently in use. So, looking at that property, that is single-handedly the best investment that I have made in real estate, and it gives me way more control. So, I would not look at buying, say, a multifamily apartment building anymore if there was not some aspect of it that I would be able to use to turn it into a business, because that is where we have the freedom. That is where the control comes from. So now I work with a lot of people who are also looking at buying businesses, and then we figure out what the tie looks like to real estate, whether they're, going to buy the building that the business is operating in, or whether they are looking at buying a building that has a business like a coin laundromat or something like that that's operating out of it. So they're buying kind of a two for one. Whatever that structure looks like, it just gives you so much more control. And then it gives you the ability to be able to buffer your risk much better as well.
I love that. I think that you're well ahead of your peers in all of this. It's so wise with this. Hey, both of us have experienced setbacks. For somebody who's listening, who's gone through a financial loss and is questioning their own judgment, what is the first step in rebuilding your confidence if you're in that position?
Well, I think the first step to rebuild your confidence. So first of all, um, I'd like to say I'm sorry you've been through that challenge. I think any successful real estate investor, whether they admit it or not, will tell you that they've lost money somewhere. So know that you're not alone in that. And I think the great thing to come from it is the opportunity to reflect on what happened and to decide how you want to structure things differently moving forward. It is really common to second guess yourself. We all have hindsight. We all look back and go, I should have seen this, I should have done this. The thing is, what do you do with that information? Do you then turn around and use it to create a stronger buy box? Do you then use it to turn around and create guidelines and criteria? And without those in place, you're not moving forward with a deal so that you can make decisions more quickly, so that you can make decisions more confidently. And I think we have to keep in perspective what we see in hindsight versus what we saw at the time. I think a lot of times when we're lacking confidence, it's not about necessarily our ability to make decisions. It's about our ability to live with the consequences of the decisions we make. Because sometimes the outcomes are great, and those aren't the decisions that make us second guess our decision making process. It's always the ones where we feel or believe that we have lost something, whether it's money, whether it's respect, whether it's, whatever it is. But we see things in hindsight that we don't see at the time. So all you can do with an experience like that is take the lessons that you can learn and then implement them in your SOPs moving forward to ensure you don't make the same mistakes. You cannot, as a real estate investor, anticipate having taking action, having a portfolio, and never making a mistake or never losing money. We've hired the wrong contractors. We've hired the wrong staff. We've done business with the wrong people. We've chosen the wrong partners. We've bought the wrong properties. It's about like we have made mistakes. And if anybody tells you they have not made a mistake, then they haven't learned the right lessons along the way or they're not being honest. It's one of those two things. But you have to know that no matter what happens, you can withstand anything. And I know that some of the hardest times in our life, I've looked at my husband and I've said, it's you and me. This is all that matters is you and me. Anything else is details. If you're you're not buying fancy clothes anymore and you're not buying designer labels because you need to cut back, none of that matters. None of that matters. You're not taking any of it with you. The only thing that matters is who you are as a person, your integrity, and the relationships that you have with people and how you make their lives better. That's it.
Amen. I love it. I love
Sorry.
it.
I get a little round up about that
Oh,
stuff.
it's so cool. And I mean, in what I do, I've spent my lifetime working in aviation, and in all of the projects that we work there, the retrospective at the end where we reflect on what worked well and what didn't, what are the lessons that we're learning from that was going to change our process and change how we approach the next customer's visit. That's something we do every day. It's always a reflection on how well did we do, but I think it applies to not just aviation, obviously, but to everything we're doing. And certainly in real estate, there's so many lessons to learn. And we're going to learn them through the mistakes we make or the things that didn't go well as much more than the ones that do. Thank you so much for that. We're getting close to the end, Elizabeth. And one of the questions I like to ask all of my guests is to understand what it is that moves them. Understanding your why you started in real estate investing, what's changed in that motivation and why to allow you now to say coaching is where you want to be, and what does success look like for you as you get there? So it's a bit of a snowball question, but why don't you give it a try and see what you can tell us?
Sure. So before I was in real estate, I was in event planning and fundraising. I worked in the charitable sector. And I loved being able to, one of my strengths was being able to look at an end result and then work out all the steps backwards that you had to take and then plan it all out. So I could look at running a golf tournament, for example, and I knew all the pieces that needed to happen. And then starting today, here's how it all flows. So obviously, I've been very operationally driven. And when my husband said he wanted to go all in on real estate, I kind of went, well, it's not really what I had envisioned, but okay, I'll check it out. And what I discovered during my time in real estate is that that skill set was so transferable and it was such an asset because so much of real estate is procedural and it's repeated. And then it wasn't until we started doing the speaking at Rich Dad that I discovered how much I loved helping people. That takes me back to my not-for-profit roots, right? Helping people by sharing with them honestly, hey, here's the mistakes I made. Here's the lessons I learned. Here's how I would do things differently moving forward. And here are the systems and processes that you need to put into your world to help prevent you from making the same mistakes I did. And then it just evolved from, teaching 3-day courses into working one-on-one with people so that when people struggled, when they had questions, when they were feeling uncertain and unsure, they had someone they could come to for guidance and for advice. And over the last couple of years, I've realized how much of that the guidance and the advice I'm providing is not real estate. It's not business. It's impacting people in different ways. It's people who are trying to figure out how to save for retirement across different investment opportunities. It's helping people who are navigating divorce. It's helping people who are, navigating loss and trying to deal with an estate of one of their parents that they're trying to figure out what to do with the pieces of it. Real estate will always be a foundation for me, but the reality is, for most of us, the skills that we gather along our life are transferable in so many different areas, and they can be helpful in so many different ways.
I love it. I love it. Real estate is all about people, start to finish, and there's so much that can fill your cup as you get to help people on their journey. Thank you so much for sharing. Before I forget, uh, if you've enjoyed this podcast and you feel it's something that your friends would enjoy, please feel free to share it. Make sure you hit the like button, and if you're not subscribed to this channel, please change that. I'd love to see more of your feedback on these podcasts. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Any last words?
I wish everyone success and please reach out. I enjoy chatting with people I know as much as you do, Steve. And I'd be honored to help people as they navigate the next few steps in their journey, whether it's redeveloping confidence in their decision making, or whether it's navigating the complexities of real estate in 2026.
Awesome. How do people reach you if they want to get in touch?
They can send me an email. I'm assuming you'll share my contact information. You can also find me on all socials.
All socials. Thank you once again, Elizabeth. It's been a true pleasure, and I wish you all a wonderful day.
Thank you, Steve. Take care, everyone.